Welcome to At Home with Music. I'm Leon Olguin, or some people call me Leon. That's perfectly fine. And some of my young students call me Mr. O. I'm quite fine with that as well. You know, I've been a musician for an awfully long time, and I've also worked with and have come to know a lot of wonderful musicians, and I've worked with a lot of students, people who really want to learn music. They want to learn piano. They want to learn guitar. There are frustrations involved. Also, musicians have dreams, they have fears, and they have desires. And so what I want to talk about in this series are frustrations, dreams, fears, and desires that I believe just about every musician faces, every music student faces. So let's start with the frustrations that you may face if you want to learn piano or any other instrument for that matter. Now, of course, piano is where I encourage most musicians to start with their music education. Then you can branch out and play any other instrument that you want. But here are some of the most common frustrations that somebody who's trying to learn piano might face. And maybe you have faced some of these difficulties if you are learning piano. Maybe you're taking piano lessons right now, or you're trying to learn on your own. I think these are some of the frustrations that you might be facing right now. And I'll tell you some of the ways that perhaps you can deal with those frustrations. One of the main frustrations that beginning piano players have is the coordination. Coordinating both hands. If you're studying classical music, very often you are called upon to play different rhythms and melodies simultaneously. Well, that can be especially challenging, especially if you're a beginner. What I encourage beginning piano players to do is to learn chords. Start by learning your chords. You can play them with your left hand, you can play them with your right hand. And we learn to play basically any song you want to learn to play, within reason, of course. You learn by playing the melody with your right hand and the chords in your left hand. You also can learn how to simply play chord progressions. That way, you'll be able to accompany somebody that might want to sing the song that you're playing, or an instrumentalist that might be wanting to play the melody. The way to get over that frustration is to start simple. Don't feel like you have to learn everything all at once. Take your time, master one concept at a time, or at least introduce yourself to it, and then move on. It takes patience to learn these things. I know you see a lot of ads for, I'll teach you how to play 400 songs in a day, or I can teach you how to play piano easy and quickly. Well, it's not always easy, and it's not always quick. Another frustration is learning music theory, scales, chords, key signatures. Well, it can be overwhelming for some students, particularly if you have no prior musical background. If you take it slowly, if you take it systematically, this is what I try to do here at Home with Music. Take you one step at a time. You're not going to learn everything all at once. You start with the foundation. I start by showing you how to find C, D, E, F, G, and so on, and we build from there. I've talked a lot about building a musical house. Start with the foundation and gradually add the different stories, if you like. Another frustration that a lot of piano students face are the technical challenges. Developing proper piano technique. You have to think about things like hand positioning, the strength of your fingers, or in reality, the strength of these muscles in your arms, and developing agility. And once again, this is not something that you can develop overnight. It takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes patience. And of course, a lot of beginning piano students become very frustrated when they struggle with certain technical aspects of playing. One way to deal with that frustration is to learn to practice slowly. No shame in practicing slowly. Maybe you've heard of the famous pianist, or pianist, depending on how you like to pronounce that word. Vladimir Horowitz was a proponent of practicing slowly. Now, he could play faster than just about anybody. It's amazing how fast he could play. But he liked to practice slowly. He would warm up by playing his scales very slowly. So that's how you can begin to develop your technique. Start slowly. On my channel, I've given you a series of technical exercises. You can check out that playlist, and those will help you to develop finger strength, muscle strength if you like, hand-eye coordination, agility, and eventually speed. Now, I must admit, I'm not really a big fan of playing super fast. I prefer more tasteful kind of things. In fact, if you listen to Count Basie, he doesn't play fast necessarily, but he plays very tastefully. There's something to be said for that. But nevertheless, that technical coordination, that technical ability, you can develop it. But once again, you can't do it overnight, but you can do it. Another frustration you may face as a music student, as someone who's learning piano, is memorizing all the concepts that you feel like you need to know. It can be overwhelming. There's so much to think about when you're playing music. You have to think about the fingering. You've got to think about the dynamics. How loud should I be playing? How soft should I be playing? You got to think about the tempo. How fast should I be playing? How slow should I be playing? And then, how do I remember the songs? For classical students, memorizing a piece of music can be a daunting task, especially if you're playing a long or more complex composition. Piano students often feel frustrated if they have difficulty remembering the music, especially if you take away their sheet music. Now, one of the ways that you can deal with this frustration, one of the ways I help students deal with this, is we're not necessarily learning classical music. We're playing songs. And one of the advantages you have if you play songs, if you play popular songs, is you can very often start with a song that you're already very familiar with. You already know the tune. In fact, you could probably pick it out on the piano without any music at all. Then it's just a matter of adding the chords and figuring out a way to accompany that melody. Or if you're accompanying a singer or an instrumentalist who's playing that melody with which you are already familiar, then you can figure out a simple accompaniment. And I've talked about that in some videos. Another frustration that piano students have is performance anxiety. They get nervous if they have to play for somebody. The famous pianist Paderewski, have trouble pronouncing his name sometimes. He would practice 17 hours a day, and he'd be so nervous before going on stage that he had to literally be shoved out onto the stage in order to play. Now, that's an extreme case, of course. But even if you're playing a song that you already know and you're very familiar with it, and then somebody says, "Hey, can you play for us?" Then you get nervous, like, "Oh, what if I make a mistake? What if I can't remember the whole song?" Well, the way you can overcome that frustration is stop worrying about that. Audiences, I have discovered in my career as a performer, can be very, very forgiving. They won't remember your mistakes, especially if you don't dwell on them. And even if you struggle a little bit, they're rooting for you. They want you to succeed. And so the more you perform, the easier it gets. You may never completely get over having a case of nerves if you are called upon to play for somebody. There are some performers who do. They don't get nervous anymore. They get anxious, like, "I'm ready to go, let's go, I want to play." But they're not feeling that feeling in the pit of their stomach, and they're getting... But some musicians never get over that. I remember reading about John Lennon, the famous rock musician, a member of the Beatles, but he got nervous. He used to get so nervous that he would throw up before he had to go on stage. But of course, once he got up there, he was John Lennon, and everybody loved what he was doing. Performance anxiety, it can be very frustrating, especially when you're just getting started, but it is something that you can deal with. A lot of times just by doing it, getting out there and playing for your friends and your family, maybe even joining a band. There's nothing like playing with other musicians to help you get over the nerves because you're part of a team. You're not up there by yourself anymore. You've got other people to lean on, other people to help you get over that nervous feeling. So anyway, there are ways to deal with the frustration of performance anxiety. Another frustration you might face as you learn music is what I would call a plateau in progress. You know, progress in piano playing or guitar playing or learning any instrument is not always linear. It's not like you're just steadily going uphill. As a learning musician, you may experience periods where you feel like you're not improving at all, despite your best efforts. And so those plateaus can be very frustrating and demotivating. Don't let them cause you to stop. Remember, the progress, sometimes you feel like, man, I'm really getting better. And then other times you feel like, man, I'm not getting better at all. But over the long haul, over the long period of time, you will continue to improve if you keep applying yourself. So those plateaus can be frustrating, but they can be overcome. Another frustration that you might face as a piano student or as a music student in general is finding time to practice. Balancing practice time with other commitments, that can be really challenging, especially if you are an older beginner. Now, I have found as this channel has grown that not only do I have young students, teenagers, even some children or homeschool parents who are getting their children started with music, the adults find it very challenging to find adequate time for practice because, let's face it, we've all got busy schedules. Now, some of you have children at home that require care and feeding, and some of you have demanding careers that require more than 8 hours a day. You know, I've been relieved of the child caring duties because I'm an old man, and my daughter left home in 2005 to go to college, and she never came back. So she's out on her own. But nevertheless, even I find it hard to find consistent time for practice. But keep in mind, however frustrating it might be, consistent practice is essential for improvement. But finding time can be a source of frustration. But here's something to keep in mind. A lot of times it's quality over quantity when it comes to practice. If you can only find 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour a day and you stick with it, you will still improve. It's not a case of if you practice 6 or 7 hours a day, you're really going to get better a lot faster. Not necessarily. It's consistency more than the quantity of time that you spend practicing and the quality of your practice. Now, I've given you some practice routines that you can use in some of my videos. It's interesting. The great pianist Arthur Rubinstein was speaking to a group of aspiring classical pianists, and he said 3 hours a day is enough. Now, that may seem like a lot, but there are many stories of classical pianists who will practice 8 or 9 hours a day. But he's saying, nope, 3 hours a day. And then sometimes Rubinstein would go days without looking at a piano. Now, of course, he had years of experience behind him and a lot of muscle memory there, so he could get away with that. But you don't have to worry about practicing for hours and hours and hours. Even just half an hour a day, 15 minutes a day. It's the consistency and the quality of your practice time that will enable you to continue to improve. Now, there may be times if you're on vacation or it's the weekend and you have more time, then you can practice for a couple hours in a day and get a lot accomplished. But don't worry if you can't get tons and tons and tons of hours of practice time. And finally, one other frustration that I would like to address is the frustration of comparing yourself with others. There's a temptation that all of us musicians have to compare ourselves to other musicians. You know, if I watch somebody like Rubinstein or Oscar Peterson or try to compare myself to other piano players, I can get frustrated with my own abilities. I think, man, I need to work harder. I need to do more. One thing to keep in mind is that every musician, every student, and that includes you, you progress at your own pace. And so it's important to focus on personal improvement rather than what I might call external benchmarks. In other words, don't spend a lot of time comparing yourself to other pianists, to other piano players. Now, you might look at somebody and say, oh, I aspire to be that good, and you admire them and you respect their abilities. That's one thing. But to look at another player and go, they're so good and I'm not that good. I'll never be that good. No, that's not the attitude that you want to have. You are who you are. You will progress at the pace that you progress. You might not be happy with your progression, with your improvement at times, and sometimes you might go, okay, I'm doing pretty good. But don't waste a lot of time, in fact, don't waste any time comparing yourself unfavorably with other musicians. You know, we're all in that same big boat. It's a boat filled with people who want to make music. That's why you are studying music. That's why you're watching my videos and maybe watching other instructional videos or taking lessons. It's all good. Progress at your own pace. Don't worry about what other musicians are doing. Those are my words of encouragement to help you overcome the frustrations that you will face as you study piano, as you study guitar, as you study anything involving music. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section. I answer every question and respond to every comment as best I can. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. That helps the channel a lot. I'm very grateful for those of you who have subscribed, but a majority of my viewers are not subscribed. It won't take long, and it won't cost you anything. So I appreciate it very much if you subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next one as we continue to talk about frustrations. Well, we've already talked about frustrations, but we're going to talk about dreams, fears, and desires that you might have as a learning musician.